Well, that's clearly the gold standard, and I'm very grateful for Wes to coming, because it does give us the opportunity to see really sort of what the highest end of this type of work is. What most, and I'm going to try to see if I can multitask here and get this thing up. I'm not going to spend a lot more time on slides, but I do want to highlight for you in the materials a few slides that you probably are going to want to just take a look at and think through. As I said, the gold standard when you're a company with the breadth and the reach and the issue advocacy and the campaign contributions of an Altria are pretty clear. But for the rest of us, we need to start thinking through, okay, where do I match up where I am right now as a corporation or as an individual to where I feel like I'm comfortable knowing that if there's this dot connecting that's going on between our government affairs strategy, our issue advocacy, and maybe some gifts that we might be doing or some campaign finance, it's very easy for outside watchdog groups or for the media or anyone else to connect dots that might not necessarily need to be there. And what we want to think through is what is the right compliance program that's going to work for us, because this is clearly not a one-size-fits-all animal that we're talking about. As Wes points out, our training and all of our compliance systems have to fit the culture of our own organization. And that's something that we need to think through very carefully. What I want to just highlight for your, just in the notes, are these slides here. I think it's like 17 or 18. I'm not sure if we have the slides in here. But what we talk in the next few slides is, that I'm not going to go through, is we now understand that there's a great deal of opportunity for advocacy out there. There's a great deal of opportunity to advocate in a confidential way, but there's also great risk in doing that. And there are a number of corporations such as Altria, and I would clearly recommend, if you have some time, troll through their website. Everything, all this disclosure is out there. There are a lot of good lessons learned. But what we want to be thinking through is, what are the types of voluntary disclosure that we want to be putting out there? And I've put in the materials a lot of things that aren't necessarily required to be disclosed that we might want to be affirmatively putting out there. The most important thing, and that includes all of our C3 activity, charitable activity, all sorts of activities. But here's the number one takeaway, and this is the slide that I want to make sure that we're focusing on. Whatever we're doing, we want to make sure that we have thought through, we have a comprehensive strategy of how we're going to operate as a company, what our values are as a company, that all of our various political activities are going to fit in. Whatever our values are is going to affect our government affairs strategy, our campaign giving, our issue advocacy, and any gifts and other entertainment of legislators. It's very easy to inadvertently, especially if you're a somewhat large corporation, to have somebody taking somebody out to dinner over here that's perfectly legal, who happens to be the chair of some state committee that happens to have some bill coming through over here, and linked together, well, wait a minute, why are you giving these campaign contributions over here as this bill is moving through committee? Clearly you're trying to buy a vote. If we have in advance articulated what our strategy is for our company, here are our values, here are the things we're going to do in the upcoming year, and everything that we do fits within our previously disclosed strategy, it makes it much easier to respond when people are asking us questions about one-off linkage between some activity here that might or might not have had anything to do with something that somebody else in the organization was doing over here. This becomes particularly important, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, in the area called pay-to-play, which has gotten a lot of news here in Atlanta just recently as Common Cause Georgia and the mayor of Atlanta have been sparring. But is a very important issue if we are engaged in procurement anywhere throughout the country, which is there are a new set of laws that say if your company or your executives are making campaign contributions to procurement officers over here, you might be debarred from engaging in procurement with that organization for 2 years. Now, that's a real pitfall, and then there's the guidance is all across the map. Some states are very strict, that it's an actual debar. Others require simple disclosure. Other states like Georgia haven't done it yet, but are clearly contemplating it because it's getting a lot of press. Now, we might or might not be worried about Rick Thompson ever catching us as the executive secretary, former executive secretary of the State Ethics Commission. I think we should. But you also need to be especially worried that this is the #1 issue that clients come to us for bid protests on. It's such an easy bid protest if you're in a pay-to-play state. If I lose a procurement to you and you're in a pay-to-play state, the first thing I do is go online and look at your executives and see if they've made campaign contributions to the procurement officers. I've got a ready-made bid protest. That is going to be the #1 way that I'm going to void the contract that you just won. And unless you've got a system in place that understands what these issues are and has the kind of training, not necessarily as sophisticated as Altria, but has given thought to this, you're walking yourself into potential pitfalls. I'd commend to you a blog that I run on this, the Pay to Play Law blog. I try to track what the states are doing and what some of the compliance issues are. Hopefully I've got a link in there. It's named the #1 legal blog that nobody reads. So I guess that's worth something, but check that out. But you do want to think what works for our company, because there are issues out there and you want to be thinking proactively and affirmatively disclosing issues. Now with that, I'm going to turn over to Rick Thompson to talk about some Georgia issues and some legislation that's actually just about to hit in Georgia that I think we're going to find very interesting.
When Wes was talking about regulators and commissions, finding all those people, I kind of got misty and teary-eyed because I miss being a regulator. But then I remember that I get to help people like you, so it made it all better. Like Stefan said, I'm just going to take a brief moment. I have a 2-hour PowerPoint I was going to show, but since Stefan promised to get out by noon, I'm only going to take a couple of minutes and talk about some of the new focuses and trends, not only here in Georgia, but also across the country. The #1 thing, like Stefan said, was this pay-to-play. Pay-to-play has gotten a lot of attention, but not just on the state level. A lot of advocates, like Common Cause and different groups like that, they don't believe the state is doing enough. So what they have started to do is now target local jurisdictions. The first one is the city of Atlanta, where they're pushing for this pay-to-play in conjunction with, they're saying that, the contracts with the airports, have screwed everything up and they've been cheating and giving out deals, but they've always said that. And the same argument they're making now, Common Cause for pay-to-play, has been the same argument they made in 2009 when Shirley Franklin was there and for a long time. It's just starting to get more steam now because we see it across the country. And there's more restrictions for people and corporations what they have to report. Sometimes it's not even just the executive level. If you have other people in your organization that are given so much money, you may have to report that as well, or that might preclude you from getting a contract. Just yesterday, in the General Assembly, they introduced more ethics legislation because, you always got to have new ethics legislation because that's how you get in the paper. And thank goodness, because people ask me what I think, so I get on the paper because I'm kind of narcissistic and that's the only way I get to appease myself. But the legislation talked about, it has some language in there about pay to play as well. So they're not really focusing on that. They're focusing on the $100, gift limits for lobbyists and how everything has to be reported and different things like that, putting the restrictions. But there is a portion of it in there that talks about pay to play, or basically would be pay to play, that if you gave so much contributions, then you could not get a contract. Or if you're a lobbyist, you can't get a contract. Or if your family member's a lobbyist and you have a company, you can't get a contract. So this kind of legislation, as it pops up, it's going to be very important to, I actually read Stefan's blog. I may be that one person. I keep trying to tell him he should put a counter on there and I'll just keep clicking it and we'll get that number up so more people will read it. The other issue, it's kind of on the same line as pay to play, but local jurisdictions are starting to require lobbyists to file disclosure reports with them. One of the things that in Georgia, and for whatever reason, even when I was at the commission, we didn't do a lot of education on this, but if you're a local lobbyist in the state of Georgia, and most lobbyists don't understand this, you have a responsibility to file the copy of the report that you file with the state that's on the internet. You have to print it off and send it in to the local jurisdiction. And most corporations, they do not know that. Well, in November, Gwinnett passed a code of ethics. Gwinnett County passed a code of ethics, and what it's requiring is if you make any expenditures on Gwinnett County officials, then it aggregates over $100 or $250 in a year, then what you have to do is you have to file a disclosure report starting in February of 2012. Well, I never read about that in the paper. You know, you didn't really hear that. So a lot of these lobbyists, I know that because I have a magic ball, crystal ball, but a lot of these lobbyists, they don't understand that. They don't know that they have these reported responsibilities. And one thing I do with Stefan and the political law team is we help firms and, you know, decide where they have to lobby or what they have to, where they have to register, when they have to report, and different things like that. And in Florida, and this is starting to go all across the country, not only do you have to register, Florida has limits. You can't give, you know, really anything in Florida, but you still have to register, okay? But not only that, Miami-Dade County, most of the cities, most of the counties, if you step foot onto county or city property and you have any intention whatsoever, or your company has a contract and you fall underneath their broadly defined lobbies, you have to register. And if they find out that you don't register, then you could lose your contracts. There's huge, huge penalties. And this is coming across in all kinds of different jurisdictions. And there's no mechanism out there for, unless you're constantly looking at that, to see where you have to report. So I will echo what the governor and Chairman Steele said, that if you don't have a lawyer that specializes in this, you really need to find one. Because not everybody, Altria has, you know, they bought a Cadillac and they keep that Cadillac up and they have the greatest compliance as far as a firm, but they also spend tons and tons of money doing that. I mean, you know, look how Wes is dressed. I mean, I don't know what, but I've known Wes a long time through Kogel, you know, they do. They just have this great thing. But some people can't, you don't want to buy a Cadillac because you constantly have to keep the maintenance up, but you can lease, you know, something, whether it's, you know, with McKenna or whether you, me, you know, with McKenna or whatever it is, if you're not doing it, you really need to do something like this, because you're going to start seeing more and more of this, especially on the local level, because that's where people are going to, the vendor contracts and the procurement. I think that's where the new focus is going to be. And these groups, Common Cause, the Tea Party and stuff like that, they're starting to see that it's easier for them to get legislation passed on the smaller level than it is on the state level. Because the state level, there's so many people there. You know, in Gwinnett County, I think they have 5 or 6 commissioners. Only one person voted against it. So you only have to convince 5 or 6 people that to pass this code of ethics or whatever, and then pretty soon you're just going to see it cover the states. So I think we have time for a couple questions. It's like 5 minutes still.
You did excellent. You did an excellent job.
Talk so fast. Congressman?
I'm always confused about the contributions that a person associated with the utility will make to state officials and to the Public Service Commission. I know it's been changed around. What is the present status of that?
The contribution, what Congressman's talking about, if you don't know, is that there has been in the past prohibitions on contributions from a regulated entity to their regulator. Okay, last year they tweaked that some, and you want to.
Yeah. Well, I on behalf of John Oxendine, the insurance commissioner, we pushed that about as hard as we could. And one of the ways we did is we filed an advisory opinion request with regard to what sort of the limits are. And the general rule is you cannot, if you're a regulated entity, you cannot give contributions to the regulator. But that expressly does not apply to individuals who work for the regulated entity. So if I'm the CEO of an insurance company, I can give money directly to the person running for insurance commissioner. Where it gets tricky is with regard to the political action committees, with the control of the corporation over the political action committees. And it also gets a little tricky when you're talking about control of PACs, like outside PACs and issues like that. So you want to be very careful before you start. If you want to be contributing to an entity that's directly regulating you, you definitely want to be taking a look at sort of where the nuances are under some of these new advisory opinions that have come down and under the statute.
So it's clear, the old statute is very broad with what is regulated.
A statewide elected official.
Right.
Written in a way that said on behalf of directly or indirectly.
Right.
I think they also expanded the definition. I mean, they call it like the elected executive official, and I think they expanded that to include a couple of more statewide officials. So I think they're all covered now as far as who's prohibited from doing that.
Yeah.
Expanded it so that you can take those public service forward.
Right.
So it's took out all of the officials who have the utility. I think it was more wrongly written than other counties that had just focused on.
Right.
This kind of really wrongly now is consistent.
And the takeaway from this is it is very important to the organization, whether you're regulated or not, given what's happening with pay-to-play and laws such as this, which are across the country, you do need to make it your business to know campaign contributions by your executives, grassroots lobbying activities. You need to be actually looking at whether we need to have some sort of a program by which people are reporting to us or at least pre-clearing campaign activity. Another issue that Georgia has just fixed up, but other states have not, relates to this idea of, are we going to have to require our procurement salespeople to register as procurement lobbyists, which is a nice, easy way to sort of create a lot of transparency without reworking an entire statute, which Georgia and a lot of other states have done to say, not only if you are engaged in legislative lobbying, but if you're selling to the state or if you're selling to any state municipality, you need to register as a vendor lobbyist or a procurement lobbyist. Now, some states, including Georgia, until it had gotten cleaned up, had maintained all of the bans on contingency lobbying, which makes a great deal of sense. You can't hire me and pay me $1 million if I get your health care bill through. But if you are suddenly going to expand the definition of who a quote-unquote lobbyist is to a salesperson, you have inadvertently just created a law by which you cannot sell to the state on commission. Now, Georgia had that. Now, some states like Florida had carved that out. Georgia has fixed that, but there are other states like Illinois that recognize that it's a problem, but have required that their salespeople define as lobbyists, but are still subject to the ban on contingency lobbying. So you need to be taking a look not only at the campaign issues, but what are your grassroots folks doing? What is your sales staff doing? And how does that fit with pay-to-play and the procurement lobbying requirements? And I think that hits us right on the number. Well done, Rick. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We really appreciate everyone coming. We'll stick around if anyone has questions, but we appreciate you coming.